Evening, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives, another program where we look at the ins and outs. We learn to shape the minds of people by bringing information and inspiration to the lives of those who are listening. We are delighted again, another Tuesday, to be here with you. What an inspiration we have in store for you. A few weeks ago, the North Caribbean Conference sent out a COVID-19 survey. In that survey, we sought to receive from the constituents an opportunity to determine what the needs are. How can we best program for people? How can we best meet the needs of those who are at home during the COVID-19 period? And overwhelmingly, many of those who responded indicated that some sort of focus need to be given to the psychosocial needs of members, those who are being challenged at home during moments like these. Of course, when you listen to the radio and when you view on your television screen, many people are now indicating that at home there's a considerable amount of stress that is being felt. And so this evening, we are delighted that we can bring to you relief, information, how you can deal with some of the issues that are facing families, how young people can identify some of the things that they are facing. And in order to facilitate this discussion, we have a very informed group of people who will be very insightful in some of the things that they want to share with you this evening. We have, of course, Pastor Timothy Leto. Pastor Leto is the intern pastor here on St. Croix. A very gifted young man. He is from St. Martin originally, but we are very happy that he is here in St. Croix being used by God to inspire people to live for him regardless. We want to also welcome with us Mrs. Linda Ambrose, none other than Mrs. Ambrose. When you see her, you get a package in one. Mrs. Ambrose is the Children's Ministries, Women's Ministries, and Family Ministries Director of the North Caribbean Conference. We're very delighted to have her, and what we are discussing here this evening comes right off the ministries that she embraces here as she holds the position of responsibility here in the conference. We welcome you, Mrs. Ambrose. And of course, we have our resource person all the way from Grenada, Dr. Augustine Panchu. If you've never met Dr. Panchu, you will meet him now. Dr. Panchu is Grenadian, went to school in Grenada. He is a hometown boy. I do not consider myself Grenadian anymore because I guess I've divorced, having been away for so long. But he studied in California and he achieved his terminal degree from Chicago School of Psychology. And we are very happy to have Dr. Panchu with us this evening as a resource person. He is going to be helping to lead the conversation and bringing depth to lots of the issues that we will be discussing this evening. Welcome this evening, Dr. Panchu.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we are so happy to have you here with us, Sister Ambrose.
Thank you, Pastor.
The family. During COVID-19, lots of families have been locked home, at home. And of course, we have heard so often, the need for us to give focus to families, especially during this period. And I think it is important for you to say to us this evening, why is the family so important that we need to focus on them in times like these?
Well, it's really important that we focus on families because they're going through something that they have never gone through before. And whether you're a Christian or not, this has affected you. And so many persons, they have relationships that they can get away from when they go to work or to school. But now everybody is in one cluster. And now we are forced to figure out how to get along apart from the little 2 hours that we used to spend together. When I had something that I wanted to tell my children and I feel like they would run away otherwise, I waited till I got them in the car. And while we're driving, they say, Mommy, you trapped us. And now they have to listen. And I feel that's how a lot of families feel now, like they're trapped and they have to listen to one another. And some people don't know, they don't even realize that they don't like each other. And so we're in a serious problem right now.
All right, beautiful. Dr. Panchu, why is it important for us to focus on families at this moment?
Well, families are really important. They are the building block of the church. The families make up the church, and the family unit make up the community and of course, society. It's really important. I want to join with Sister Ambrose in addressing the unfamiliar relationships that are now being forced to be forged upon our children because of the lockdown from school, from government, from churches. Sorry. So it's really an imposition on the psyche of families and especially children, who many of them have not experienced abstract thinking, so they are very insecure and unsure about the entire lockdown and COVID-19.
Right. Mrs. Ambrose speaks of families not having, should I say, the joy or the escape of work. And so many have had to cluster at home over the weeks, seeking now to make good of a situation that they're not familiar with. So it says to me, it says to me, it is important for us as families to be sure that we have the necessary skill that it takes in order to handle those situations. What recommendation do you have, Dr. Pancho?
Well, you introduce the novelty of the situation, in that many persons find that they do not possess the necessary skill to deal. I tell you, it is really the presence of COVID-19 has put a strain on all relationships, familial relationships, across the board. What do I mean by that? Because right now we are finding that we are forced to spend time with people that we have not had the opportunity to spend time with before. So guess what's going to happen, Pastor Philbert? Pastor Philbert, what you're going to see is that people must now learn to coexist in the very homes that they have been enjoying before, but now because they are there 24/7 most of the time, they must now develop new strategies for dealing with it. So let me quickly add, you asked, so how do we cope? Well, we cope by, I tell you this, I have been advising people to take a little break. Look for opportunities. You have to. You cannot be forced 24/7, 7 days a week, 31 days for the month and 52 weeks for the year, 365 and a quarter days for the year, that we're going to be forced to stay in a relationship while we do not have the skills to necessarily navigate the intricacies of it. So here's what I tell people. Look for opportunities to take a break, whether it is in the backyard, whether it is in another room, so that you can compose yourself. When children are nagging, listen, very many of us husbands, we go out, we travel, we work. The mom stays at home with the kids, or relatives, extended family. They have the joy and the privilege of taking care of children. We come in like super dads. We bring in gifts and we bring in wisdom and we bring in and cash to the family. No, we have to bring in a relationship. Getting up in the morning, saying I love you, I care for you, helping to do dishes, helping to cook, helping to clean. And so it's a stressful time for us. So I say to people who are experiencing anxiety-related relationship issues, look for opportunities to take a break and a breather, kind of get your bearing, get yourself organized, your thoughts and your equilibrium, so that you can face the challenges while we are in lockdown.
I believe Mrs. Ambrose would have some comments to add to that. Mrs. Ambrose?
Yes, I sent out a children's ministries survey entitled "What About the Children?" to ask the parents how their children seem to be coping, what changes have they noticed. But the first question on the survey asks, how old are your children? And 51% of the parents that responded said that their children were between the ages of 5 and 9. These children don't know about the skills that you spoke about, and so it's their parents that have to help them come off the computer, forget about school sometimes, go out in the backyard, as you said. But the children, the parents have to guide them in this. These children are not going to be able to sit down all day. Nobody's attention span, at least a 5-year-old, should not be on the computer doing school work for an hour. They have their amount of time, 30 minutes the most, and they need to take a break. And their health, their mental health, their physical health will be affected if our parents do not pay attention to helping them cope with this stressful situation.
Pastor Leto, you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you would have said that. The necessity of taking a break, at least for a child, is huge, because I was speaking with my nephew. I'm going to share a little personal information. I was speaking with my nephew, and he was telling me of all the schoolwork that he had to do, and he was being piled upon and piled upon and piled upon. And it was really hard for him to really understand math in the context of being in a lockdown, right? And I tried to put myself within his shoes to be able to understand, because I had the opportunity of learning math in a classroom as opposed to, at home in front of a device. And the necessity of taking a break, like a 30 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour from doing that, constant viewing of a tablet is quite quintessential there, I say, because without it, they would not be as productive as they think they would be if they would spend that time just dealing with it the entire time. So breaks are very important.
Okay, I'm coming to you, Mrs. Ambrose. Let's deal with the children. As Children's Ministries Director, lots of families will have had their children locked in their homes. And some of them aren't able to deal with the presence of the children on a 24-hour period. We are accustomed to dropping them off at school. The school becomes the daycare center. Yeah. And then when they come home in the evening, we sometimes pay little attention to them. What advice do you have for parents in regards to children during this period?
Okay, well, I was listening to the news the other day, and one of the things they said on the news is that parents are willing to pay teachers anything they think they're worth now. Now that they see what the teachers have to deal with.
When you're through, we will ask Dr. Panju to come in. But you go ahead, Mrs. Ambrose.
Yeah, but as I said, I think now is the time to enjoy your children. If we act like teachers who have a curriculum to cover and we are not flexible and we are not helping them to cope with other things, we're just in line with study, we're going to, not only are the children going to suffer, but we are going to suffer. Our relationship is going to suffer. It's important that we listen to our children, that we spend time playing with them, that we enjoy them. If we don't enjoy them, our lives are going to be miserable. The children need stress relievers. I remember doing a study one time about children. Parents think that they're the only ones that go through stress, but little children suffer from stress. And little children can get heart attacks, and little children can be depressed. And so it's so important that we spend time with God in the morning. We ask Him to lead us, and we spend time with our children. I sent out an article to the education director and to the president that says, now is not the time to be trying to complete schoolwork. Now is the time, and I'm not negating that the schoolwork is important, but now is the time to put practical things in place. place. If the children are learning mathematics and 5 plus 5, take them out in the garden and let them plant 5 seeds and 5 over there, 5 orange seeds and 5 apple seeds. Let them do practical things, and you will see how much of a joy it is when they get to do these things.
Yeah, Dr. Pancho, you want to comment, please?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Let me say this here. We have to understand. Ms. Ambrose talks about the survey that she sent out was for children between the ages of 5 to 9. It is very instructive to understand children around this age, 5 to 9. These are pre-pubescent children who, if we were to look psychologically at them, we would understand that they're going through a stage that Erickson calls, industry versus inferiority. Now, I want to associate this concept with schoolwork. If children become overwhelmed with a lot of schoolwork, it affects their ability to achieve. And when children's ability to achieve academically and otherwise, it's not just academics, whether it is mastery of home school skills, daily living skills, mechanics, whatever the skills are, if children do not master those skills and if they become overly stressed out, there is a possibility that children could leave the situation very emotionally drained. I want us to know that clearly. It is one thing to be tired physically from exertion, but it is a totally different thing to be exhausted. Mental exhaustion is really telling on our children. It affects the perspective and it affects the achievement.
Okay, so here is what. Some people are already indicating their intention or their desires to send questions. So you can send us your questions and your comment on the social media, and we are going to try to respond as much as possible. You don't have much time, so please, if you have your questions and your comments, you can send them to us right now. Mrs. Ambrose, you have been involved in trying to assist parents in coping with the children by creating videos and trying to make sure that parents have additional help. You want to speak to that right now?
Yes. It's important. I'm trying to make sure they have their Sabbath school lessons, they have children's stories, but I am making them available on the conference website because the children may have enough to do. They may or may not. And so we don't want to bombard them with these things, but we want it to be there in case they need it. And the parents, in the survey also, I asked parents if Adventist Bible studies were available. Do you think you would use it? And they responded. And so I sent it to them by email and I sent the links. But it's important that we have these things in place so that their spiritual lives are built also, not just their academics, physical life. We believe in the whole person. And there are some parents, they are at home, and admittedly on the survey, they said they're not spending time studying with their children the Bible. They feel overwhelmed by the schoolwork. And so we know that if we are Bible-believing people, we know that it's important that to seek God first and everything else will be added onto us. And so we are providing these spiritual aspects. And so we want you to know that these are available on the Children's Ministries page of the North Caribbean Conference website.
Okay. Dr. Pastor Leito, you, that's prophetic, yeah? You represent a generation.
Yes.
Many times we tend to think that these are the ones who have it together. We have our resource person, Dr. Pancho, here with us. Do you care to raise one of the issues that you think these young people would be going through at this moment?
I think young people would be facing, we clearly don't have it together. As young people, we often face existential questions, even on a without any crisis or without any pandemic. We're facing existential questions. Now, during this pandemic, I could only assume further that these existential questions are also being magnified. What is going to happen to my future, my existence? When you go on Facebook and social media, young people use memes as a language, so we crack jokes, but underlying the jokes are very serious issues. So a lot of young people, maybe even within the church, they feel like, okay, this is the end. We're done. So the same levels of fear, anxiety, depression are being amplified for the young people right now as they try to navigate this whole, COVID-19 pandemic. Some of them had been in school and university. They were doing their studies. They were about to graduate this year. All these things, they paid so much money to go through school, and now, there's a level of uncertainty that's attached to this whole pandemic, and the feelings are stronger, in my opinion, are stronger. Dr. Pancho gonna have to, probably hit me with a little science, some facts, but the feelings of anxiety, fear, and depression are also magnified for the youth.
What advice would you have for that group of individuals, Dr. Pancho?
Well, there is no question. We are wired. The human psyche is wired to attach itself to a routine. We have developed, and that's one of the basic that's one of the basic need of the human, to find safety in a routine for your life. So students have formulated a certain kind of routine for their life. They go to school for a certain number of hours. They study for a certain number of hours. They do chores, and they engage in work-related activities. They do recreation. So they have developed a routine. That routine is what creates for them a safety net so that they can thrive, they can achieve academically, they can build relationships, they can prosper, and they can be healthy, and they can be wise. Now, what COVID has done is to take away that safety net and has fractured that routine. Because the routine is now fractured, they have to rewire their psyche now to develop a new routine. And it is sometimes very difficult to develop a new routine. It takes practically between 27 and 36 days for us to change one routine or one behavior. So, COVID has only been with us for about 6 weeks, close to 2 months in terms of lockdown. So people students especially, have not yet created a new philosophy about life. Neither have they created for themselves a new routine to make them feel safe. So what do? We encourage them to look for new things to engage themselves in. You're right, Pastor Lieso, because what we're seeing is that students who are close to graduation or who should have walked the aisles, they were sent home for a couple of months before the end of the semester. What that has done is to break the routine. Now instruction is online and virtual learning. Some of them are not prepared for it. They are not acquainted with it. Every new thing must now be learned afresh, and you have to unlearn old methodology. You have to find safety in the new things. It is very difficult. So we say to them, I say to parents, you have paid a lot of money for your students' education. Be patient. You are going to see a lot of anxiety manifested in the behaviors of children, and especially students. Some of them may want to give up. Some of them may want to change their trajectory in terms of their career. So be patient with them and continue to pray for them, as Sister Ambrose would say, okay?
Pancho, as young people, we really treasure this idea of independence. We love being able to do what we want, when we want, how we want to do it. Parents would, my mother would identify with that. Parents would identify with the young people, their children saying that. now because of COVID-19 and because of this pandemic, that sense of independence, that sense of freedom, that sense of being able to express themselves freely is no longer with them. And it could be, I think it's tied, there's a link with, depression in young people. We'll see a rise of depression in young people as a result of their liberty, quote unquote, their freedom of, free movement being restricted. And that is very serious, because the things that would engender from that feeling of depression or, just loneliness, or also that feeling of, well, they don't have any value, they don't have any, relevance, that could also transition into not only depression, but also suicide and, outbursts of violent behavior within the home. So it's something that is something that we really need to look at and really seek to understand as we try to traverse this murky terrain.
Okay, you want to comment to that, Mrs. Ambrose?
I just wanted to agree with what he said. I've noticed that in my young adult children that are home as a result of COVID. And my daughter is studying online and she's doing 20 credits, and that's enough already at college. But to be at home trying to navigate all of that and to graduate this summer. And at the end of the day, she says, "Mommy, I just need to go for a drive." And so she would take the car and she would just trying to get away, just to take a break. And so we have, as Dr. Panchu said, we really have to give them some space and keep them in prayer, because this is a difficult time.
Okay, we'll take a break and then we'll come back.
The world that we live in is a world filled with chaos. It's filled with trauma and anxiety. People look to the future with fear. But hope amidst chaos brings to them that new sense that this world is in the hands of God, that the world is not simply catapulting out of control chaotically, but God has a divine plan for this world, just as God created the world. And at a point in time, and just as Jesus came at a point of time, Christ will come again at a point of time. You can have a major part in helping men and women prepare for the coming of Christ. Participate in something grand for Jesus, and watch as the earth is lighted with the glory of God as we pass out truth-filled literature.
Okay, so we are back here of our guests this evening, Pastor Timothy Lato, Mrs. Linda Ambrose, and of course our psychologist, our consultant this evening, Dr. Augustine Panchu, and he's coming with us all the way from Grenada. I think you have a question for Dr. Panchu, Pastor Lato.
Yes, we're as a young person, we're transitioning into this whole idea of coping with grief and loss now during COVID-19. My question to you, Dr. Panchu, is in regards to the youth. What coping mechanisms or what coping measures would you recommend for a young person who is experiencing grief in a time like COVID-19 as a result of seeing, for instance, a parent or a family member or a friend or relative pass away in this time?
So, this is a very trying, a very, very, very traumatic time for everyone, but especially young people. Loss, whether it is someone, a family friend or a family member who is treated with and or tested positive for COVID, the coronavirus, or we have several persons who have lost loved ones, especially people from North America and England and Europe. Um, right. So you're asking, so how do we help them to grieve? I want to let you know that very often, even for the Christian, and I want you to know that, listening audience, even for the Christian, we go through the grieving process. And mind you, I encourage people to grieve because I believe in grieving there is healing. A lot of times we tend to look up with disdain upon people who are crying and who are grieving because we tend to think as Christians that we have this blessed hope and that should cover it all for us. But for the human being, it is necessary to grieve. One of the things and the phases or stages of grief is is anger. Anger. And a lot of times, the person who has experienced grief or in the process of mourning is angry, and they're angry at sometimes they're angry at God. Remember that as a pastor. That's really important for you to understand. They ask, why me? Why God? Why didn't you prevent it? Because children, especially, they see God the way we present it, which is a good way. We present God as the all protector and all. Even during COVID, we would use the regular slangs of God will protect you. God is good all the time. Well, how do you tell a young person God is good and she or he or she is supposed to say all the time? Well, COVID just took a family member of mine. How does that gel? They are supposed to grieve. So one of the things is that people and children, students, they're angry and they're angry at God. Then they add the depression because they cannot fathom, they cannot understand uh, why it is that it has happened and the grieving process. So many times there is a nice little book I want to recommend to the conference. Maybe you could use it for a lot of people. Sister Ambrose, Mrs. Ambrose. It is called uh, On Death and Dying. It's a very small book, maybe $5 on Amazon. You can get it. It's by a writer named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. That's a real nice book that we can give people in our congregation who are grieving so that they could understand the 5 stages of grieving. And so be ginger. Approach young persons who are grieving gingerly. Pastors, I want to encourage you and your congregation to allow people to grieve and don't make the mistake of giving them a time frame in which to grieve. We tend to say, okay, well, it's 6 months. A lot of people say, oh, so after 6 months, you're supposed to move on. No, because grieving is a process. And sometimes it's cyclical. We go from phase to phase and we revert to phases. Sometimes we go from anger to depression, from acceptance to denial, and then we come back to anger again every time we remember the loved one is lost.
Here's my concern, here's my concern. You have individuals, because of their personality, they can manage the situation. But then you still have the other individual who is unable to handle the issues. And what you find is that when the issues come before them, they isolate themselves in an effort to deal with those situations. What advice do you have for these kind of individuals? And many people try to be mature. Is that the word? The matureness in men.
Macho.
Right. They try not to allow themselves to appear as though they are grieving.
Toxic masculinity.
Right. The masculinity in them seem to be dominant, and they don't want others to see in them this sign of weakness. But you still have the group that is, they don't know how to cope with those situations. They are silent, they are unable to deal with the organization and the life that comes after it. What sort of coping skills, what kind of advice do you have for these individuals? Because here in the conference, let's be very clear. Lots of members are losing loved ones. And
yes.
the Zoom cannot compensate for the cultural values that we place around funerals and losing loved ones.
right.
We cannot
Yeah.
hug anymore. We cannot be at the home for the repast anymore and the weight that comes with it. And so many families are burying their loved ones with added stress and the sadness of not having people to be around them. Not even the members of the church can grieve and fraternize with these individuals the way they would want to. And it seems to some that it brings some measure of guilt because they feel that they have not done enough in order to help that individual go through the process.
Yes.
And
yes.
can I
Culturally,
plus
so-
the,
Go ahead.
Doctor, I want to add to that. It's not only people who have lost persons that may be grieving. For instance, my mother is in Florida with my sister, and she has had two difficult hospitalizations, bleeding in the brain, and so forth. And I feel a sense of, oh boy, I can't even be there for my sister, not even worrying about my mother so much, because my mother is the kind of person who says, all to Jesus, God has it under control. But I'm feeling this sense of guilt that I can't even be there to help her. And so this thing is more complex than anybody really realizes. So let me hear your answer to that.
There is no question that the aspect of grieving that we're talking about that has been brought upon us by COVID-19 is going to linger. Mark my word, North Caribbean Conference, it is going to linger for a long, long time. The trauma of COVID-19. You may not have lost a lot of people directly in Northern Caribbean Conference, but the families are going to continue to grieve. So there are a few things that you brought up here about personality, Pastor Philbert. You talked about how a person's personality will help them to cope, depending on the personality, much more than somebody else. You are absolutely right. Here, this is what we call resilience. Many persons have, because of their past experience, they have now fortified, in other words, reinforced their ego strength with certain coping skills that others have not. And so for them, when they experience a trauma, they can revert back into that strength, that ego strength, that strength of self and resilience, where others do not have that to fall back on. So these persons who do not have that strength, they are vulnerable and they are easier to enter a state of depression, anxiety, and real deep mourning. I tell you, you brought a really significant point, because we're seeing this here in Grenada too. It's not just in North Caribbean, I think it's throughout the world. People have now taken funerals into a platinum level, I call it. We have all these fancy tributes that we give. In fact, funerals is now an entire day's activity. You spend 2 hours giving tribute and paying respects and enjoying and celebrating the life before you go into the solemnity of the actual service. We don't have that. Right now, it's 30 minutes. In Grenada, it's 30 minutes. I do not know how much is Northern Caribbean, the government are allowing funerals, but in Grenada, it's 30 minutes. Everything has to be done. The grave has to be covered in 30 minutes. This is placing a real big strain on families and the grieving process and the camaraderie and the ability to touch. We as Christians, we place a lot of emphasis on shaking hands and hugging, because we believe this is one way the human feels safe and we're bonding. Remember, the skin is the largest sense organ of the human body. That's why it needs constant stimulation. We call it cutaneous stimulation. So because of COVID, we have all these restrictions on the way we grieve, on the way we greet, on the way we celebrate, and this is creating for us a lot of anxiety. So how do we deal with it? Well, we deal with it with a lot of prayers, with a lot of trying to get a lot of sleep, taking a lot of breaks, self-talk, talking to ourselves. We, as Christians, we have the antidote for stress relief, That is proper diet, proper rest, a lot of water, good sleep, recreation, and prayer. So I submit all of those to us and to say, practice it now. Now we have an opportunity to practice all of those things we have been talking about. We have been preparing ourselves for it. Now is the time for us, Pastor Philbert, to put those attributes and lifestyle virtues into practice.
Okay. We have one online question that came in. We want to ask the question. Then I'm going to ask Mrs. Ambrose to say a few, give a promotion that she needs to of what is available to children. Then I'm going to take your final comments, and then we're going to close the discussion. We're not going to go on very long, okay? Pastor Leto?
Yes, so we have a question from YouTube from Verkisha Graham, and she asks this: how can extroverts cope during quarantine? How can extroverts cope during quarantine? Now, the question is really valid because extroverts have that, as we say, extroverted personality, a bubbly, they get their energy from being around individuals. And quarantine and restrictions is, it kind of seems it doesn't go hand in hand with an extroverted person. So how can someone like that cope?
A brilliant question by a person that's thinking, because I tell you, the lockdown and COVID-19 is a haven for the introvert. Now he or she can isolate, they can stay in their room, they can spend time on the computer, they don't have to talk to people, they can do whatever they want now because there are so many kids and people in the house that parents could easily forget that I had another child. That's for the introvert. But the extrovert, I tell you this, it's really a challenge because these are the vivacious, the bubbly people. They're the life of the party. So guess what? I say to them, the answer to the question, go ahead. Expand your camera, your hard drive on your computer and on your camera. Take selfies, take pictures of everything, make videos. Yes, create a band, start singing, karaoke. Have your own Queen show, make your family. Now your family is trapped at home. Let them be the audience, let them be the judge. Create for yourself an audience. The extrovert, please, I tell you, this is a good time for you to experiment, to sing, to dress, and to be vivacious and your prolific self.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so here's what. Before we close this evening, Dr. Pancho, we want to express the need for being here, not only to deal with the issues surrounding COVID-19 as it relates to the family and what the family is going through, but we want to offer help to our families. And the Family Ministries Director of our conference, Mrs. Ambrose, has been working extremely hard in producing materials that can assist families. Additionally, she has organized a day of prayer to assist families in helping to intercede with God on behalf of the children and their families. So we wanted to take some time and speak about that, Mrs. Ambrose.
Okay, thank you very much. COVID has really made me into something that I was not before.
Creator.
Yeah, and so this Sabbath coming, the 23rd of May, is designated as the Sabbath for Day of Prayer for Children at Risk. And we are aware that children are at risk now more than before. Those who are living with their abusers, shut in with their abusers, and there's so many things going on. But this is a yearly program. And so what we've organized in the North Caribbean Conference is a Zoom prayer chain. We have a 10-island territory, and so over the 10 islands, we have found children on each island who are going to be praying via Zoom prayer chain. And so we are inviting you to join us on Sabbath at 9 a.m., Pastor, 9 a.m. for 30 minutes. You're going to see children from the different islands using Zoom as a prayer chain. And 9 children are going to be praying, and their other, one is going to be singing her prayer, and another is going to be telling stories and so forth. And it's 30 minutes. It's very short because, we have to take into consideration their ages. And so we ask you to join us on the North Caribbean Conference Facebook page, Sabbath, at 9 a.m. And this is going to be something that you have never seen before. We invite you to join.
Thank you, Mrs. Ambrose. Well, Dr. Panchal, we're going to wrap up now. And can I take liberty to ask if we can come back a second time? Because I think we have lots more issues to discuss. And I think we would need to do it a second time, okay? I'm going to give Pastor Leto an opportunity to say a few words before we close. And then I'm going to give you the opportunity, and then I'm going to close the program for this evening. Okay? Pastor Leto?
I just want to say this is to the young people out there who are struggling to cope during COVID-19 and the pandemic, going through the struggles, and knowing that the struggle is even more real than it was before. I just want you to be encouraged and to know that God is still with you. It is hard to navigate this time. We understand that. I understand that. The extroverts, the introverts, it's really hard to go through this time. Nonetheless, we can find ways, and there are ways by which we can cope. We as a generation of individuals like us, we would have realized that now is the time when everything has transitioned into a more digital age. We're using Zoom, we're using Facebook, we're using social media on mass scale, and now is really a time where we have been empowered, and we can really be able to showcase that empowerment and be helpful and useful in these times. So I'd like to encourage you to look at the positive side of this pandemic, which will help you then cope despite the negatives that go on.
You want to say something?
Yes, I just like to say that I realize that we're all zoomed out. People are tired of working on Zoom, studying on Zoom. But when my mom was in the hospital and we got together for prayer on Zoom, it was like 30-something of us from California, Florida, Texas, Tortola, all over. And we had a praise story because the news was good, but then that turned into a family reunion, a Zoom family reunion. So use Zoom to meet with your family and have fun and enjoy it rather than just for work and school and so forth. Relax yourself. God bless you.
Dr. Panchal, we want to thank you for coming with us this evening. You've been a great source of inspiration, a wealth of knowledge. You have any closing words for families this evening?
Yes. I want to address something that actually Pastor Leto kind of alluded to very early in the program. And that is the perspective of seeking external help from counselors, therapists, clinicians, psychologists. I think our church, and I need to say it very gingerly, have shortchanged some people have shortchanged our perspective on ourselves. And I want to make it abundantly clear to your listening audience and to our brethren in the churches. We give God the supremacy in our lives, and we accept him for who he is and what he means to us. But there are times when during life we have certain challenges that it is absolutely okay to reach out to a professional who has been professionally, clinically trained to help us navigate the troubling times of our lives. Mrs. Ambrose talked about being forced to be in relationships that you are really not prepared for. A lot of prayers could go into that, but if you could get somebody to help you navigate it and to understand the nuances of relationships and being in forced relationships. Listen, our church is going to have to deal with the after effects of COVID for a long time. I want to just allude to a couple things and then I'm going to say bye. We talk about childhood sexual abuse. We talk about domestic violence. Listen, please, it is okay for us, even as a church, to talk about it, because these forced relationships are going to create a lot of unhealthy interactions, even among our brothers and our sisters. So at the end of COVID, God forbid, but we may have to deal with all of these unhealthy relationships that have been forced upon us by COVID. So I make myself available to you, and I want to say to your church brethren, it is okay to get professional help in addition to a prayer life and dependence upon God. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Pancho. We are excited for your offer, and we are really happy for you joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure coming into your homes this evening. I'm sure the wealth of information you receive, you've been able to take a new path with new thinking of how you can navigate some of the difficulties that we face as families during this COVID-19. We want to celebrate our panelists this evening and thank them for their expertise. But most of all, we want to thank God that amidst all of what we're going through, God sees, God knows, and God hears. And guess what? He is only a prayer away. So our recommendation is, while we seek all the professional help that's needed and necessary, be sure to build your family altar. Be sure to seek God day and night and ask Him to guide your family, because we know the old adage, the family that prays together stays together. May God bless you. May you have a good evening in Jesus' name.